Hi, my name is Bart Stuck. I'm going to be talking about a adult faith formation class that Marjorie Partch and I have developed. The class has been developed over the last 4 years. Title is Mysticism, where science, art, and spirituality meet. And that'll be the subject of our activity today. Um, I'm going to start here with a PowerPoint deck. Oops, hold on a second. This was all under the umbrella of an entity we created called AlephTalks. AlephTalks.com is the website for all the material you'll see here. If you want more information, send an email to alephtalks@gmail.com. Aleph is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It also, in mathematics, is used to symbolize infinity. And the end result is AlephTalks is a play on TED Talks. Aleph also goes from beginning to end, from alpha to omega, as shown in this graphic here. We focus a lot on the eternal feminine, as shown here with Sophia, people like Mary Magdalene and so forth, and their role in all of this. And over here, we have an abstraction of the tree of life, out of the Kabbalah, the most mystic side of Judaism. At the top, we have some entities that are sending energy down to the lowest levels, which is where we're at. There are 10 levels here, and it's possible for us to send energy back up here. And so it goes. So we're going to come and revisit these things as we get through our class. Why do we do this class? Well, there are only two ways to live your life, according to Albert Einstein. One is as though nothing is a miracle, and the other is though everything is a miracle. As we look out the window, we see incredible beauty in nature. When we look up in the heavens at the stars and the galaxies that are there, we see incredible beauty on a different, huge scale. And when we look down in the microcosm, we see order and beauty everywhere. So wherever we look, everything is miraculous, and we see order everywhere. And that's what we want to share with you, is what we see this hints at. There's two other reasons why we put this class together. One is that participation in organized religion in the United States has been dropping decade by decade. In 2007, Pew Research surveyed that only 16% of the United States professed being religious, but not with any religious affiliation, no organized religion. In 2022, this had grown to 28%. And this is now the largest single factor in the survey. That is, the people in the US that are most numerous are those that say they're religious, but they actually have no ties to any organized religion. Second thing, the other thing to keep in mind with this is simply showing that materialism is increasingly ascendant, and that spirituality is on the wane, that organized religion is not a part of daily life in the United States. After 500 years, modern Western science has realized that it's actually been studying only 5% of the universe, and it calls the remaining 95% dark. So here's a graphic from NASA showing this little yellow piece that is what we've been studying. 27% is what's called dark matter, far more prevalent than just matter, which is us. And then we have dark energy, which is even bigger, which is the energy that's in space itself, that's driving space to expand everywhere and driving all the galaxies away from one another. So this is an incredible energy that we're dealing with. So one way to explain this is that we're in three spatial dimensions, and we've been studying 5% or 1/20th of the universe. So in order to get the other 95%, we need to go into 3 times 20 or 60 dimensions to have enough dimensions just to hold all this extra mass and energy. And we'll pursue that idea. Marjorie Partch, my colleague, put this class together with me. She's a Jungian astrologer and writer, and also a poet. Her academic training was at Columbia, the New School in New York City, the Jung Institute in New York, and then activities at the Theosophical Society, and as an academic researcher and essayist. She's also been trained as a labyrinth facilitator. Lauren Arness, who's in San Francisco, has created a Veriditas. So the Veriditas is greenness, and it's what was championed by Hildegard of Bingen in the 1100s as a viable philosophy. Marjorie's been active in the Unitarian Church in Westport since 2003. Her parents were raising her as an atheist, but she did attend Unitarian activities in Brooklyn Heights, New York, when she was growing up, off and on, as well as other things. My background is as an applied mathematician and theoretical physicist. I spent 8 years at MIT as a student, 12 years at Bell Laboratories, where I published over 30 refereed technical papers, co-authored a book, taught the material out of the book at both MIT in a special class and at Columbia University for 3 semesters, and then went off and did a lot of independent consulting work, over 450 engagements involving over $60 billion in capital placements. My former wife and I adopted a boy from Bulgaria in 1998. We wanted him to be exposed to religion, and so we chose to have him go through the faith formation program in Westport, Connecticut, and they did a wonderful job. My own upbringing has been as a Roman Catholic in Michigan. However, my grandparents in the Pennsylvania coal fields attended an Eastern Rite church where everything was in Slovak, because my great-grandfather came from the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the 1880s. My first communion actually was in this Eastern Rite church, which is very much like Orthodox church. It's a particular sect of Catholicism. I did a confirmation as a Roman Catholic, and then I disengaged until joining in 1998 the Unitarian Church. We have 10 modules here for our class. I'm just going to run through these, and then we'll pick up on them in detail. So the first activity is we have to set the foundations. This is really important because we want to have meaningful discussions about these topics. And unless you put down the ground rules and the limits and the boundaries, you can have people talking past one another, over one another, having people say things that say the other person is wrong when they're both right, or they're both wrong, and so forth. So we spend some time trying to lay down the foundations. Then we have 3 different modules here dealing with science. The first one dealing with the notion of synchronicity, due to Wolfgang Pauli, who received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1945, and Carl Jung, who corresponded with Pauli over 1930 to 1957, and had 89 letters discussing the ideas of modern physics, as particularly quantum mechanics, which led to this notion of synchronicity that we'll come to, which is an acausal connecting principle. The reason why they focused on this was Pauli was a theoretical physicist. Many experimental physicists asked him to come to their laboratories because they had an experiment that would impact or deal with some aspect of a theory Pauli had been working on. Pauli would walk in and the experiment would actually collapse, literally. And so this was come to be called the Pauli effect. So that this is where the notion of synchronicity comes about. We look at science in the macrocosm and science in the microcosm. So in the macrocosm, we're looking at the stars. We're looking now with the advent of much better telescopes over the last 100 years. We can see the stars are clustered into multiple galaxies. There might be 100 billion galaxies in our universe. And this has also led to the notion of everything moving away from everything else, driven by this dark energy, which has led to the fact that if everything's going away, that at some point back in time it was all together, and that's the start of this current epoch of our universe. This has come to be called the Big Bang Theory, and there's a wealth of experimental evidence that supports this. But increasingly, there's what's called the Big Bounce Theory, which we'll go into, which suggests that really our universe goes through cycles where it expands and contracts, much like Hinduism said the universe functions. So this is nothing new, but it leads to not a bang, but a bounce in what's going on. We'll then turn to science in the microcosm. We'll look down into the atom and into the quantization of space itself. Space is compartments, so you could think of that making up a foam that's all around us. But this is in 26 dimensions, so we really do need more dimensions here. And what we'll see is there, for each of these 26 dimensions, there's thousands of additional dimensions that are associated with this. So we have plenty of room to handle all this extra matter and energy we're talking about. So that's our focus on science. And now we turn to the notion of spirituality. In the East, we start with Hinduism. We look at the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, at the teachings of the Buddha, and in China, the Confucianism, and also Lao Tzu and the Tao, the Way. We then turn around and go back to the West, where we look at Judaism, and in particular the Kabbalah, the most mystic side of Judaism. Jesus of Nazareth was a Kabbalist and a Essene, and this led to the creation of Christianity, and then Muhammad followed in the footsteps of Jesus of Nazareth. And we focus in this a lot on the eternal feminine. There's many other things that we'll touch on here. This is a survey of many, many different faiths, but we just want to keep this in mind. We then turn to American transcendentalists. So Ralph Waldo Emerson, who originally became a Unitarian minister, but then dropped out, studied the Bhagavad Gita, the fundamental work underlying Hinduism as a organized religion. We turn to the poets, Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, and Mary Oliver, who's much more modern than them. And then we look outside the US to the Islamic poet Rumi and the German poet Rilke, who also exhibit this mysticism that we're searching for. Carl Jung is next to be surveyed. He popularized the notion of there being a collective unconscious everywhere, some sort of higher entity that is underlying all of reality, but it has different aspects to it, which he called archetypes. If you look at astrology, what you'll see is there are 12 different houses that we can have in the zodiac, and each of us, when we're born, draws on or resonates with archetypes from each of these 12 to a greater or lesser extent, which leads to our own individualization as we get to be older And we interact with these archetypes, but they're all related to this collective unconscious. So all of us are related to each other, according to Jung, and that's what goes on here. Jung was born in the 19th century, lived into the 20th century, but really we think his ideas are for this century, the 21st century. We then turn to synchronicity again, but in a different way, in divination. So here we're dealing with the I Ching, which was a way to try and divine the future with different pieces of wood that you would cast and see what happens, and it's surprisingly accurate. We also look at astrology here and how that relates to divination and the archetypes that influence us starting at our birth. And then finally, we look at the tarot, which is an extension of all of this. The labyrinth, which is an exercise in walking meditation, closes out the class, and then we do a summary of parallels and intersections. So that's the syllabus, 10 modules. We'll go back now and just briefly survey these. For synchronicity, we've already talked about how Pauli and Jung interacted from 1930 to 1957, 89 letters, and they tried to make order out of what was going on. And the focus was on this idea of synchronicity. In the macrocosm, we touched on the idea of inflation. So here is the start of the universe, and then everything magically inflates here very, very rapidly. And so you should think of this as a phase change, where this might be water, and then it evaporates and turns into fog in the air around us. So it's a change in phase from liquid to gas. Rapid expansion here. Here's the notion of the universe being cyclical. So here's a universe here, which has been expanding, and then it contracts, and then it expands, and then it contracts, and then it expands, and then it contracts again and again over the eons. And here we see the fact that this is just one universe doing this. Here's what they look like at a particular instant of time, with all of these different universes expanding and contracting around one another. And it's not implausible that they might not hit one another. And in fact, that's what it appears has happened, is that these bounces rule out the fact that there was a nuclear fireball here that created what has been called the cosmic microwave background that has been sensed since the 1960s, again and again, with radio telescopes and all kinds of satellite with special metrology that's there. And so if there wasn't any bang that occurred, what in the world was being measured? More than likely it's this, that one of these universes impacted our universe, and that led to this explosion, this cosmic microwave background radiation that is indeed everywhere in our universe. But there was no nuclear fireball that created our universe. When you look at the microcosm, we said that there's 26 dimensions here, but it's broken out into 10 dimensions that are shown here, 10 dimensions over here for dark matter, and then 6 dimensions here that coordinate everything. Now, the thing that's special about this is that these 18 dimensions that are here are what are called compactified dimensions. They arise from a manifold that was first proposed by Eugene Calabi, who's shown here, and then shown to exist. Remember, this is a mathematician. You need to show that this thing actually exists. Just because Calabi said, oh, look at there's this manifold here, he never gave a proof that showed it existed. Well, this mathematician, Ching-Ting Yao, in fact, did that. And the fact that he did it, gave him the Fields Medal, which, if you're familiar with mathematics, is the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in mathematics. So this is not a trivial thing to show that these things exist. Here's a picture here in 2 dimensions of one of these 6-dimensional Calabi-Yau manifolds, and you can see it's got all kinds of structure. And in fact, there's movies of this on the web. Remember, this is just a 2-dimensional rendition of a 6-dimensional entity. And so you can see that there's holes here and so forth. And then over here, you can see how things are compactified. That if we looked on, say, in our space-time, we looked on the x-axis, we look out here ways, if we actually looked on the x-axis, what we'd see rolled around that axis is another dimension that's here. In fact, another 2 dimensions, and it's wrapped around that x-axis. And that's why we don't see it. It's because it's intrinsically very, very small. So we end up with 4 dimensions that we live in for space-time, but there's another 6 dimensions here that are all compactified. We have X, Y, and Z dimensions here. So the other 6 dimensions are in fact wrapped around the X, Y, and Z. There's, remember, 3 of these, one around each of X, Y, and Z. For dark matter, we have the same thing, that there's 4 dimensions here, but then there's another 6 dimensions here that are compactified. And finally here, we have a linkage to synchronize everything. This is the highest realm here. You should think of us as the lowest realm, but we drew it the other way around. And the thing to keep in mind here is that there's holes. There are 3 holes here in the 10-dimensional matter subspace. And there are 4 holes here in the dark matter 10-dimensional subspace, and there's 8 holes here in the top. So we have a total of 8 holes. The 3 link up here, 4 link up here, and the final one is connecting 2 of these 6 dimensions here. So if we have 3 times 6 or 18 dimensions, and we have 8 holes, then there's really only 10 dimensions here. And 10 dimensions is what we saw is in the Kabbalah, the tree of life, where it in fact has 10 nodes that we deal with here, going from the bottom to the top in terms of enlightenment or lack of enlightenment, depending on how you look at it. Another thing to keep in mind that's interesting about this is we have 3 holes here in the matter subspace. And if you look at an electron, you'll see that the electron has 2 resonances, that there's 2 other mesons there associated with the electrons. Really, there's only 1 electron. The other 2 mesons that are there are actually resonances due to these 3 holes. And we play on that when we construct all of these different things here. The matter that we're talking about lives here in these 10 dimensions, and it consists of electrons and subquarks. We have charge, electromagnetic charge here on these things. That's what lives here. Over here in the dark matter area, we just have subquarks with no charge. And the difference being that the subquarks that are here for matter are actually part of a 10 strings. The 10 strings capture energy, so that you could think of, for example, an electron being some jelly, energy jelly, that's caught inside 10 resonating strings. The dark matter has 5 strings, and it captures energy, and that's inside the 5 resonating strings. But the dark matter can only interact by having the subquarks combine with another through gravity. There's no charge whatsoever dealing with these things. And so the final piece to this that's truly amazing is that there actually is information that's on top of all these subquarks, the electron, the space compartments that we're talking about, and that's constantly scanning any change that's here in this arena. And the end result of that is that there's a pilot wave theory of quantum mechanics that David Bohm proposed, as well as Louis de Broglie. Louis de Broglie received the Nobel Prize in 1929 in physics. Bohm could have received the Nobel Prize if they'd actually discovered this information pilot mode, but he didn't. And what comes along with all this, just so you can understand, is for each of these 26 dimensions, there are literally thousands of other dimensions that are linked to these. So you have the possibility, by being in space-time and stepping off into one of these other dimensions, and then literally stepping up above space-time, so you become invisible. You're up above it; they can't see you. And this is an amazing attribute. And there's many other consequences of this that we don't have time to go into. Continuing, we have our mysticism in the East with Confucianism, Taoism, the Yoga Sutras, Buddhism, Hinduism, and the path in the West, Judaism, and the Kabbalah being the most mystic of these. The teachings of Jesus of Nazareth in his way, and then Muhammad with Islam. So we end up with art as a spiritual practice here. We look at music, dance, drama, painting, sculpture. All of these things end up activating an area of your brain, which is the area that's energized by sex, drugs, and rock and roll. When you resonate with these things, when you hear some great music, some great dance, you see a great painting, that kicks in there, just like when you're dealing with sexual activities and so forth. So this really is an incredible spiritual experience of art. The eternal feminine is through all this, and is evident in all of these different faiths, which we'll come through. And then we have special topics we deal with. The Eleusinian Mysteries are a festival every year in Athens, where they walked out of Athens and went to Eleusinus. A select few, and by select few, I mean people like Plato, ended up taking probably some hallucinogen that was a psychedelic of some sort. And this was a life-changing experience for them. They all were sworn to secrecy. They could never tell what had really happened, but they all revered it as one of the high points of their life, being able to participate in these mysteries. I would contrast it with the Cathars, who were in southern France and were following the path or the way of Jesus of Nazareth. They were attacked by the Roman Catholic Church and the King of France in the 1100s and were wiped out completely. The Cathars, for example, had many women priests that led their services, but there was no notion of, for example, a cross here in their teachings. They were just talking about how to pray, how to meditate, how to achieve love and compassion, starting with yourself and with your neighbors. And then contrast that with indigenous shamanism, which is found on all continents, going back into the depths of time. And all of the shamans themselves probably learned to meditate and to sense the incredible beauty that we see all around us, with great clarity that the Buddha saw. We turn to the American transcendentalists. So first with Emerson, with his commencement address at the Harvard Divinity School in 1838, where he encouraged anyone who was becoming a minister to learn to meditate or pray, because then you could help others to do so. He was very much into the Bhagavad Gita, which is the core of Hinduism. He worked with people like Whitman, and he was aware of Emily Dickinson, and we also have Mary Oliver. But then there's many other poets that are incredibly mystic. We cite Rumi and Rilke. Clearly Goethe and Shakespeare fall into this category of incredible mystics. We turn to Carl Jung, who was, again, born in the 19th century, lived in the 20th, but he's really the prophet for this century with his notion of archetypes and the collective unconsciousness and all that goes with that. We turn to the notion of synchronicity and archetypes and divination, the I Ching, astrology, and the tarot. By the way, Jung himself was quite knowledgeable in astrology and kept a natal chart of every single one of his patients, his clients. So here we see the I Ching. Over here we see the Book of Kells, which is astrological. You can see the four evangelists here, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in here. And this is from St. John's vision of the apocalypse, which is, again, very mystical. And then the tarot having these two entities here. We have a labyrinth walk on the solstices and equinox here. And this is where you are walking through the labyrinth. There's one way in and one way out. You will not get lost. This is not a maze, but it meets what's called sacred activism that Andrew Harvey has popularized. We typically try and tie in a labyrinth walk toward fundraising for some activity, such as, for example, Native American women that have been abducted and are probably sold into prostitution and slavery and so forth, of which there's thousands every year that just disappear. And so we try and raise funds by participating in a labyrinth walk to fund groups that deal with that, to try and end these sorts of abuses. Here we see a notion of the planets running around the sun. We see the fact that the brain here, with all of the different articulations in the brain, in many ways looks like what's going on in a labyrinth over here. This is the labyrinth at Chartres Cathedral in France. And this is the rose window that's up right above it. If you could drop the wall with the rose window, it would go fill exactly onto this labyrinth that you see here. And you can see that there's 12 different houses, 12 entities running around here in this rose window. And so it goes. So this is something that you have to go see to believe. It's incredible. Both the rose window and this labyrinth here. The conclusion in dealing with parallels and intersections, we go back and focus on the Kabbalah because it appears that the mystics there were able to capture a lot of the things that are common to all of these different faiths, and we highlight that in closing the class. So the class is taught online by Zoom every week. It's a 2-hour class. We typically start in October and end in June. There's over 100 individuals now all over the place that receive every week the links to this Zoom class. And they also receive the recording. Every class is recorded and available on YouTube. There's a YouTube channel there. And all of the class materials are available on the AlephTalks website. A number of people that miss a class will look at the recordings, or sometimes they'll simply stream it and they're driving around in their car and they'll play the audio recording of it so that they can multitask and so forth and catch up on things. We're constantly curating what's available. There's, for example, Wikipedia has continually improved. YouTube in 2022 said that for every minute, 500 hours of videos were uploaded to YouTube. So there's more and more videos out there on interesting topics, germane topics to what we're having this class, which we try and touch on. And we try and constantly update and improve our bibliography to capture these sorts of things. There are guest speakers from time to time. We had one from the Jung Institute, for example, and we've actually had students participate and lead classes, as well as they're always able to ask questions and participate in any class. So if you wish to participate, again, send an email request to AlephTalks@gmail.com and we'll get back to you. The notion that we have here to keep in mind is the following, that Jung argued there's a real need for some higher entity, some collective unconscious beyond the personal subconscious that permeates everywhere, and that is really something that anchors everything that we see around us. But this collective unconscious has these multiple archetypes that resonate to a greater or lesser extent with each of us, depending upon our inclinations, our individuations. And so with that as a background here, all of these religions that we've come across, the theme that we take is that they each express some aspect of this collective unconscious. But you should think of it as like the blind man, that are all touching a part of the elephant, the tusk, the trunk, the ear, the foot, the tail, the side, and they each say, I see what it is, but they all miss the point that there's really one elephant there. That's what we argue, that this collective unconscious is really what's been missed in all of these different faiths. And we choose to take this larger picture, a more unified view through our interdisciplinary interfaith approach to the really mystical teachings and practices of the various faith traditions and how science plays into this. So you can see, for example, science has played into the notions of Genesis and of the birth of the universe. In the Jewish mystics, the Tzimtzum describes the birth of the universe. And how much of that do we incorporate in modern science? How much evidence do we have for that? Actually, a great deal. Another thing to keep in mind here is that, just to be very concrete, we look at 4 different major faiths. Hinduism, where the goals are dharma, ethics and duties; artha, prosperity and work; kama, for desires and passions; and moksha, for liberation and freedom from the passions, and the cycle of death and rebirth, or reincarnation, that we have an eternal soul, but the body that we have gets incarnated, turns it into the living being that we are, and then at death goes back to dust. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and the teachings of the Buddha suggests that we should get into deep meditation, that this is a very important practice. And when you do this, you realize after a while that you lose duality, that many people think, well, there's a little person inside my head and it's looking out through my eyes. And so that's one thing, the little person there. And then everything it sees outside is the dual, is the rest of the world. But in fact, when you meditate deeply, you realize that actually there isn't a little person inside. There isn't any self-identity, that you're in fact in union with everything. And there's an incredible clarity that comes with this. You should perhaps think of this as being in a movie, and all of a sudden you're able to sit out in the audience. And when you're out in the audience, you realize that, oh, I can see me in the movie, but actually what's going on is the whole universe around me, the movie theater, the whole world that's there. And that is in fact the reality, not the movie. And so it goes. Lao Tzu and the Tao, or the way, was the source and ideal of all existence. So the way is unseen, but not transcendent. It's immensely powerful, yet supremely humble, and it's the root of all things. You cannot describe the way. That by itself is impossible. but yet, hundreds of millions around the globe follow the Tao. Then we turn to Judaism, the Kabbalah, Jesus of Nazareth, who is an Essene. And here the argument is that God is within you. You should love yourself and have compassion for yourself. And this leads to loving your neighbor and having compassion for everyone. So these are the key things to take away from this. That's our class. And we hope you'll find this informative and want to come and learn more about it. Have a good. Bye-bye.